Hi, I'm Stevie Mack and welcome to another episode of Stevie's Plate. Have bees evolved alongside humans or humans alongside bees? Whichever way you think, you should meet Mark Colley. Mark is no ordinary person. He's a farmer, an intellectual, a philosopher, and a beekeeper. Mark's commitment to the preservation of the art of natural beekeeping is something that needs to be seen and heard. Welcome to Mark's Plate and his sacred role as a keeper of bees.
Nature's what we see, the hill, the afternoon, squirrel, eclipse, the bumblebee. Nay, nature is heaven. Nature is what we hear, the bobolink, the sea, thunder, the cricket. Nay, nature is harmony, nature is what we know. You have no art to say, so impotent our wisdom is to her simplicity. It's mindful, living in the moment. People don't do it. Live in the present, take time out, sit in nature, look, observe, listen. Everything can be broken down into patterns and math. I had a conversation with my uncle he always wondered, I come from a family with no faith, I guess. Not a lot of, we weren't churchgoers. And John said to me, have you got faith and how do you define it? And I said, I define faith as the divine formula. So somewhere, someone, something created a formula and from that life evolved. And John was like, wow, you have got faith. It's a home. It's a tent we're living in temporarily. Home has bees and gardens that yield and give, and bees and butterflies and birds. It's a home. It's a home for us, it's a home for nature. Just started off with a couple of hives, wanted to be a beekeeper, and had the opportunity, the site, and the support required to do it. So one hive became 6, 6 hives became 12, 12 became 24, and so it went on. So what was a hobby, a pastime, I wanted to carve wood, keep bees, read, listen to music, find some way of making a living, I guess, out of all of that. And I always wanted to keep bees, and it just became what my wife now calls your obsession. But she's great. I mean, I enjoy it and she knows that I love it, so, and she's growing to love it. I think she does love it. Family is often defined as relationships between people. But I like to expand it. Relationships with landscape, people in it. So that's family, living, treading gently on the earth, I guess, and giving people the opportunity to be what they want to be, do what they want to do. That's been our objective with our children. There was a famous debate which took place between Rudolf Steiner and the commercial beekeeper way back in the 1920s, and a series of lectures, and it was basically one method of beekeeping against another, the sort of commercial beekeeping versus natural beekeeping. And Steiner advocated that we should work with nature and in nature and not against it, and that commercial beekeeping was kind of using a bee as a means to an end, turning it into an agricultural tool, if you like. And his argument was, if we didn't start to respect the natural processes as far as bees are concerned, then we would start to diminish or wipe out the species as a consequence of modern farming methodologies as they were back then, and more natural ways of doing things, or more gentler ways of doing things. So natural beekeeping is basically a way of gently managing bees, I would say, and sympathetically running them, rather than running them or treating them like a tool to produce something at a given volume on an annual basis. There's many different designs of beehives over the years, from straw skeps to clay pipes, all the way up to Langstroth boxes. Emile Warret designed a hive in France, a monk, called it the People's Hive, the idea being he defined the basic spacing required in a hive, which was later adopted by Langstroth hives, which we use now. Keep bees in log hives, you can keep bees in, or just let bees be in nature and take the honey as and when you require it. When we first moved here 22 years ago, there were some bees at the back in the tree. So we figured I'd keep bees, and we try and do it in such a way as to not displace the feral bees, is what they call them, but whatever. The native bees, I call them. So all the way through our beekeeping, we've been sensitive to the numbers of hives we place and how that interacts with the rest of the environment. So we're not placing 300 hives on one area and displacing the bird life from the native bees and whatever's indigenous to that area, which is what can occur if you do things like that. So we've got a small number of hives here, and we manage those hives, and I take regular health checks on the native bees just to make sure that they're still here. The native bees are invaders like us, really. So there's a whole over 2,500 native bees, and they're still finding bees, and they're still classifying flora in Australia. The Northern Territory still hasn't, all the flora up there hasn't been classified yet, or identified. So why would you want to displace something that's indigenous? And those bees have got a place. They've evolved in the local environment, the local ecology. So why would we want to eradicate them? We don't know. We know hardly anything about them. Some of them are better known than others. There's work going on at the moment trying to use native bees for pollination purposes, but I'm always wary about taking something from nature and then again try to turn it into a tool. I think there's a fine line we've got to respect. I don't think we do respect nature enough at the moment. So we try to reflect that in our beekeeping. Bees that we have here, so we have Italian bees, Ligurian bees, and we have the native, or the bees that have evolved from the European bees that were first brought over, the local bee. Well, it's not, I guess, local, inverted commas. I don't know at what point something becomes indigenous. Does it become indigenous after 100 years or a couple of thousand? I don't know. But anyway, they've evolved into a bee, Mellifera mellifera, darker bee with a longer proboscis that feeds on a broader range of flora and fauna. So we rerun those. So I guess that's a native bee, possibly. When you open a hive, queen bee will usually fall to the bottom or hide in a corner unless she's busy laying eggs. So queen bees are bigger than other bees, different shape. Sometimes they're a different colour. Sometimes they can have a flush on their throat, red, depending on age. But they're different shape and they're usually surrounded by an entourage. So bees, when you open the hive, are usually head first in honeycomb. The queen bee is abdomen first in honeycomb and head out. So you can usually find her on the frame because the bees will cluster around her. If she's there, she might be in the corner or on the bottom. She's usually the one that the bees will protect, so she might be under the mass of bees and you just patiently wait for them to disperse. If you're gentle enough, they'll just disperse and then you'll see her. And then you can assess her age, condition. Kind of instinctively know where she is. You can tell where the bees are concentrated, and if you can look at the hive from the top, and once you start lifting the frames out, you can work out where she would be. She might not be in the top box, for example. She'd be on a warm day. She'd be in the middle of the hive. She's not going to be near the ground. It's too warm, so she's going to be up slightly, maybe in the second box, laying eggs. She could be in the third box, inspecting the honey reserves. But once you take the lid off, she'll go down to the second box. If you take the second box off gently and slowly, she'll go down to the first box, and then you can work your way through those frames. Usually she'll be in the middle, unless you're being a bit violent or rough, then she'll be in a corner or on the bottom board. Yeah, just be patient. She will reveal herself. Around here, eucalyptus, the understory, so callistemons, grevilleas that we've planted, the orchard trees, and the ground cover, the lavenders, the rosemary, the herbs, the veggie patch. But they'll do that 5 k's out, so they're feeding on everybody's veggie patch and everybody's understory. Try and plan a week by the weather forecast or what's happening. It depends on time of year, ambient air temperature, humidity. If in winter, quiet time for a beekeeper, just doing all the woodwork, building bee frames or furniture for a hive, building roofs, bases, whatever. We've got 4 different types of roof that we use, or lid. We've got 2 different types of base, depending on the location. We might put a thicker lid on, thinner lid. It's all about maintaining temperature in the hive. So it's all got to be built from scratch. And in every hive, there's furniture frames, so they've all got to be assembled and wired. So we can't use iron in a frame, it's got to be copper or stainless steel. So copper coated nails or copper nails, brass eyelets, stainless steel wire. If I'm using wired frames, we don't always use wired frames. I like using blanks, I call them. Just a frame with no wire, no foundation. And then the bees can, if you use foundation, the foundation's imprinted with the size of the honeycomb. If you let the bees build their own wax without the imprint, they'll build the cells bigger. And they'll build the cells bigger to accommodate drone cells. But you also get better, you know the provenance of the wax, whereas you don't know the provenance of the wax from foundation. Cosmetics, balms, salves, raw honey, cold filtered honey, bee propolis, soap, beeswax wraps, candles, tea lights, scents, Edwardian idea. Yeah, try and utilise everything we find, basically. And then we get on to things like podmore and zabrus, and yeah, that's a bit of a speciality thing. We don't pasteurise our honey, we don't feed our bees sugar, we don't use synthetics in our beehive or on the outside of our beehives. We centrifuge or press the honey, and making sure that it's as unmessed with as possible. So it's all everything. There's no heated pipes. I don't even use a decapping knife. All the honey caps are broken by combing, unless they're pressed. Yeah, so we try and keep the honey as complete as we can, as unmessed with as we can. some cultures it's highly prized. So raw honey is highly prized. It's used for a number of things, both topical applications and internal applications. It's good for biome balancing. It's a slow release sugar. It has propolis in it, and we don't microfilter it. Yeah, we don't dilute it once we've got it. It's the consistency, or the viscosity of the honey is the natural viscosity of the honey. We only take capped honey from the hive, we won't take uncapped honey, and we won't take brood out of the hive. So any cell that contains baby bees, worms, with worker jelly in, we just leave them in the hive too. So we'll only take honey from a beehive once there's sufficient honey in it for it to get over winter, and we only take what we require. We don't take all the honey. We don't strip a hive completely of honey. So we can get honeys that are matured, and by matured they're fully matured, it's fully capped, single frames, and then we process those frames. So honey, two main constituents, glucosamine and invertase. Honey high in glucosamine will set quite hard relatively quickly, like a lavender honey will set really quickly, a yellow gum honey will set really quickly. The more invertase you get in the honey, then the slower it will crystallize, and usually the darker the honey too. So there's a mixture of those two elements, and they're basically, it's fructose, but it's slow release sugar as opposed to refined sugar, rapid release. So slow release sugar gives you gradual energy build up, not just a sugar crazed high. Yeah. So we try and keep the honey so it blooms, so that you get the white crystallization within the honey, and that's when it's at its peak condition and it's ready to eat. Certain crops need pollination. Angiosperms need pollination. Bees that rely on a third party, they need pollination to flower and then to fruit. So yeah, like orchards, apples, apple blossoms, you need pollinators. Something's got to pollinate, move the pollen from flower to flower. So that, in that sense, yeah, beekeepers are were once viewed as the backbone of agriculture. So canola, to make it seed you need bees, but would you put bees on canola? Well, I wouldn't, but some will. And it's another source of income for beekeepers, and it's really lucrative. I talked to an orchardist this year. He paid over $7,000 for pollination for 3 months for 35 hives. So the beekeeper left with hives that were 4 boxes tall, so he got honey, he got wax, but he also got cash for pollination. Now, you can move bees around, and the more you move bees around, then the more stressed and tired they get, and then you get hives failing. And so in that sense, pollination is important for agriculture. Yeah, but we don't do it because people spray a lot. So they'd raise bees in the desert environment in winter in earthenware pipes that were set in adobe walls, and come spring when they needed the bees, they would force them out of, gently push them to one end, and get them to go into a straw skep. They'd load that onto a papyrus boat, and then as spring went down the Nile, they would pole the raft or the boat down the Nile. And they knew when they had honey, the boat would be lower in the water. So then they'd take the skeps off, immerse them in the Nile, put another one on top, put that back on the raft with the bees, and harvest the honey and the beeswax, and then use that for food, sweetener, and then cosmetics. also see the blue fairy red?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
lots of those.
Yeah, they're usually out the front of the fairy red.
No, they're all over. Do you want me to give you a beehive so you can eat the brood? She says yes. I said no.
There's a lovely little bird just gone in your thing.
Was it yellow and black?
And small.
It was a honey eater. That was my nickname, yeah.
Why? At what age?
Boy Scout 6, chasing butterflies, digging up wasps' nest, scout camp, got hammered, following bees, up at crack of dawn before the sun, crawling out under the fly sheet, which just seemed to be the most practical way of doing things, other than stepping over all the bodies that were lying on the ground sheet. But anyway, in and out under the fly sheet like an insect. So hence, insect, yeah. And always round, yeah, doing weird things, climbing trees, you know what I mean, using spiders.
Being a boy.
Yeah, but not pulling the legs off. That's what the other kids didn't. Why weren't you pulling the legs off? No, let it be. Just want to know about it. Brought up in the north of England, Lake District. Fantastic place to grow up. We had mud flats and all the bird life and then agriculture and a lot of people that were into self-sufficiency and sustainability way back then. Back in the early 70s, with people that wove cloth, people that carded fabric, people that market gardened, and they're all doing it without chemical. And that was the way they did it. The guy next door used to make his own cigars out of tobacco he grew in the north of England. That used to amaze me. So my bedroom was looking into his tobacco leaf loft. So I guess brought up with it. We've moved away from, I mean, what's it? One man can now farm, what, 2,000 hectares on his own because there's no hedgerows, there's no trees. He's got computer-controlled tractors. He's got chemical. He's got fertilizers brought in from Morocco. He's got his fertilizer, his insecticide, his fungicide, and you know, man, we've gone mental at the moment, I think. I can remember walking to school and seeing a man weaving a hedge. And he was weaving a hedge of bramble, blackberries, and something else, hawthorn. Right? And he was weaving the hedge. And I said to him, and he had a bill hook, and I'd never seen one before. So he stopped and said to him, "What are you doing?" He says, "Oh, I'm repairing this hedge." And I just said to him, "How old's that hedge, do you think?" He said, "Oh, it's probably started around 300 years ago." And I said, "And you've managed that?" And he said, "No, my father managed it, my grandfather managed it." And so he was pruning the hedge and weaving it together, sufficient enough to stop a bull. There was always a bull in that field. And then main road. And I was absolutely stunned. I never thought that you could. No one does that anymore. String a line of barbed wire, rip the hedge out, put a gate in, electrify the fence. You know, no one's got the time anymore. Don't think we know how to do it anymore. There's probably no one left alive that can do it. Dry stone walling in England, fine art. You know, people are now beginning to discover it as a hobby, but people made their livings by dry stone walling. I had real difficulty reading, so I didn't get into all of this stuff till I was reading. Right? So, thanks to my father's mother. Who are childhood heroes? You're not going to believe this. David Attenborough, Life on Earth and all that stuff he used to do. Jacques Cousteau. Had a lot of time for Jacques Cousteau. Couldn't believe those shows. And then I found out about the scuba thing and later on about the boat he invented with the windlass sails. Man, that man was a genius. So it was anything to do with nature, I guess. Yeah. You can live a life in denial, or you can live a life of fulfillment. If you're not true to yourself, then you're living a life in denial. If you're following a passion or a belief, then go for it. Don't waste your time trying to be something you're not. It doesn't work. Well, there comes a point where you think, mate, with me, accounting, cooking, chef, audiology, accounting, wasn't happy with any of them, threw them away. Never been happy in my life. If I died tomorrow, I'd die with a smile on my face.
Because you're a beekeeper.
Because I'm keeping bees and I'm having fun and I'm enjoying what I'm doing and I'm learning every day, and it's great. If you can't get knowledge, nobody's going to give you knowledge, nobody's going to give you experience. You've got to go out and get it, you've got to find it. If you want to inspire yourself, go out and see somebody who's inspired. A lot of beekeepers are inspired, and you can spot a true beekeeper from, I don't know what they are yet, I haven't really determined what they are. I know there's beekeepers, there's bee havers, there's bee, I don't know, exploiters. Real beekeepers, you can spot them a mile off.
Mark Colley's commitment to beekeeping is both heartwarming and inspiring. And if I was a bee, I know who I'd like my keeper to be. Until the next time, thank you for joining us, and don't forget, it's never too late to change what's on your plate.
And there was other people too, like the lady who was a friend of grandmother Gwyneth, who taught me about geomorphology, reading landscapes. She was a geology teacher. And who else did I meet? Jack, the beekeeper, Uncle Jack, keeping bees. Man, he was a hero for a while, I'll tell you, because he kept bees. That was really good. That's it. Yeah.